everyone. Welcome back. You survived the morning. We're now into the afternoon, into our panel sessions. Hope everyone had a good lunch. Yes? Those jackfruit things were really tasty, weren't they? Welcome to this afternoon where we're split off into discussion panels in this room and workshops in the next room. And we've got a fantastic panel to kick off this afternoon. So, without further ado, I like starting on time, bang on 1 o'clock. We have Youth Voices in AI, the big survey with YoungScot. We have some fantastic YoungScot volunteers on the stage here with us, but I am going to hand over to Vari Akin, who's an ethics fellow at Alan Turing Institute, and Kirsten Urquhart, who's CEO of YoungScot, to co-chair this session. To all of you online, please do send in any questions via Slido, and obviously all you in the room can ask questions too. So let's kick this off. Let's hear from the people of YoungScot. Over to Kirsten and Vari.
And thank you all, everybody, for coming along and joining us this afternoon. As Seth said, I'm Vari Akin. I'm an ethics fellow at the Alan Turing Institute, and I'm really delighted to be co-chairing this session along with Kirsten today. I think this is a really, really exciting and a really important discussion to be having here at the AI Summit. Young people today are growing up in a world of digital technologies and AI that no other previous generation has grown up with or experienced in the role of a young person. And so I think it's really, really important that we think about young people's experiences, young person's hopes and fears around the ways that AI is already being used in their lives today and how it might be used in the future and how it's shaped in the future. We hear a great deal in the media and also in policy-making discussions around the ways that young people are interacting with digital technologies, the ways that young people are interacting with AI, and particularly on social media. And we often hear a lot of concerns around the risks that AI or digital technologies might pose for young people. But we almost always only hear this from an adult's perspective. And I think it's really important to remember that no adult experienced being a young person, experienced being a teenager or indeed a child in the world of digital technologies and AI technologies. So even with the best of intentions, decision-making around design, development, deployment of AI systems, or decision-making around policy, governance, and regulation, even when this is explicitly with the intention of thinking about young people's interests or protecting or safeguarding young people, is often based on adults' assumptions of what matters, or adults' assumptions of the ways that young people are experiencing these technologies. And I think that's a real problem, and it's a problem that we urgently need to address. We need to move beyond making assumptions about what matters to young people, or assumptions about the ways that young people are interacting with and experiencing technologies, to really bring young people's voices into decision-making and young people's voices and interests and experiences into decisions around the ways that AI technologies are designed, developed, and deployed, as well as around decisions around future policy, governance, or regulation around AI. So I'm not going to say much more. I think there are 5 people on this stage who are far more important than me and have far more insightful, interesting things to say than me. So I'm going to leave it there. But I'm really excited for the discussion that we're going to have. And I'm going to hand over to Kirsten, who's going to say a bit more about YoungScot and about the survey that you've recently done.
Thank you, and nice to see everyone. Thank you for having YoungScot and some of our youth volunteers along to the session today. So YoungScot is a charity. We're a charity that supports young people to thrive, and we offer a wide range of services to young people. I won't go too much into that today because I think, as I said, we're keen to hear directly from some of our volunteers. But one of the things that we do to inform our work at YoungScot is work with young people across Scotland to gain kind of insight into the things that are impacting their lives. And so recently, just towards the end of 2023 and into early 2024, we undertook our big survey, which is a very imaginative title for a survey, but really that's about our attempts to try and understand a whole range of issues that are impacting young people's lives. So we've picked out a wee bit of that today because some of that has been around kind of digital and the use of AI, because we're really keen to make sure that we had an understanding from a wide range of young people across Scotland about how are they currently using AI and what are some of their kind of thoughts and potential concerns around that. We do have a whole wider range of insights, so shameless plug, we do have an event on the 17th of April, an online webinar, which you can find out about on our socials, which covers a whole range of those kind of issues that are impacting young people. So just some top-line data here. So we had just over 2,000 young people that took part across all 32 local authorities in Scotland, and the age range it covers is age 11 up to 26, so quite a wide age range there. So you can see that 48% of those that responded to the survey are using AI tools and apps, and you can see here some of the most popular ones that are being engaged with. So smart speakers tend to be kind of high up there, but also My AI on Snapchat is another kind of feature that you'll be aware of that gets use, and you'll also see ChatGPT there as well. 34% of young people are using ChatGPT currently. What are they using AI for? So again, you can see here that a lot of it is around the accessing information and getting answers to questions. So they're using tools to ask questions for them to be able to get the right answer to things, which is interesting in itself. To summarise information, but also a big part of that, as you see, 62% is about just for fun. So it shows that young people are exploring and experimenting and playing with some of the tools that are available to them. And you think about some of the social platforms in particular that have some of these tools in them, you can see why young people are making that correlation. But also the last point there about to chat to somebody I know isn't real. I think that's interesting in itself, and that young people are aware that they are engaging and chatting with something which isn't a human, essentially. And then final slide for just now before we move on to get some reflections is, do they have any thoughts and concerns about using AI day to day? And again, we heard some of this picked up this morning from the wonderful session from the Children's Parliament, where there are some concerns about what happens with information. They worry about how their data is used, and that concept of being kind of tracked through their phone, 43% worrying about how and if they're being tracked. So this just gives us a bit of very top level insight into some of the thoughts of a wider kind of group of young people. And as I said, we'll be sharing kind of these findings in due course over the coming weeks, so please do engage with that. But most importantly, we're now going to direct some questions at our brilliant volunteers around some of these issues.
Yes, I have the first question, and Maury, I'm going to come to you first. So the question is, for people like myself working in the field of AI, probably for most people in the room here today, you can have the sense that everybody's talking about AI, and particularly generative AI. And so I'm really interested to know if are we living in a bit of a bubble, or are young people also talking about AI as much as perhaps we all are?
I think from my experience, a lot of young people are, they like the AI craze, and I'm a uni student personally, so I know of my friends using AI to kind of ChatGPT for their uni assignments and helping in structuring. But I also know a lot of young people who who are neurodivergent, and they find that AI is really good in giving them lists and tasks for to help them initiate tasks. So I think that I would say a lot of young people like how AI brings accessibility into their life. I think that's something that a lot of adults maybe don't realize. It's not just for cheating on a test or kind of using it silly. I think it can bring a lot of good real world uses and in helping a person shape their life. And also it provides a lot of it's clarity. If you search something, if you're not sure where to start in Google, for instance, or if you're struggling for a recipe, I think a lot of young people, particularly when you're at a stage in life when you don't know where to start, and you don't know what you should be doing, and even the smallest tasks making food for the day, and balancing and budgeting, AI can really help with young people in helping their lives. And I know a lot of online, a lot of tips directed to young people from other young people is using AI to help you budget, using ChatGPT to kind of help you if you are stuck for looking for food, or if you're trying to make something with like 3 ingredients, and you're able to come up with a recipe that you would never have done before. So I think it's kind of accurate.
Yeah, and that's really interesting.
Thank you. So, Tammy, coming to you, so our survey found that 4 to 8% of young people are already using AI tools. So I suppose kind of building what Miriam said, is that kind of seem about right based on your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I do feel that AI tools are used in a wide range of applications, such as virtual assistants, Siri, Alexa, and also recommendation algorithms such as social media platforms, streaming services. So AI tools are pretty much integrated into our daily lives. They're everywhere and they're easily accessible. I think as a young person, you get really excited when using AI because it's something that doesn't necessarily have human qualities, but is able to respond back to you and act like a human being. In some ways, even replace a human being, which is becoming ever more scary. I think it's important that policymakers, educators, teachers, parents, and guardians make sure that young people are educated on AI, as no one knows what the world will look like in 10 years' time. And AI is slowly becoming something that is becoming more and more part of our lives. I also feel that people who develop the algorithms for AI need to think hard and prioritize on inclusion and ethics, as our young people are interacting with this technology, and they need to know how to use the product carefully and safely. And also the AI technology needs to reflect the diverse society we live in. So, very much.
Thank you. And Ewan, coming to you, I mean, we've heard it kind of mentioned about things like ChatGPT and education in school, and 90% of our survey of young people said that they use tools such as ChatGPT in school and college work. So how have you been using AI technologies?
I think, first of all, education is a really important point. Education is changing. You know, if you think about what education looked like 20, 30 years ago, it's so different to now. We've got the intrinsic kind of core models of education, but the technology we use now, the active panels in classrooms, all of that is so different. And the Scottish Government's just done their Hayward Review, which is changing education fundamentally. So we are looking towards a new future. We're looking fundamentally at how we change education. And so it's really important that as we've used technologies like smartboards instead of whiteboards or blackboards, we're looking at how we're using things like AI and how they can enhance education, not replace education, but enhance it, and that's so important. If you look at the statistics, I mean, 34% of those who use it have used ChatGPT, yes. But now, if you look at Microsoft Copilot, for example, which used to be called Bing AI, when that survey came out at the end of the year, that wasn't Microsoft Copilot yet. And so these things are constantly changing, they're constantly evolving, and it is hard to keep up. And so the way in which it's used in education, I'm at university at the moment, I'm in first year at University of Glasgow, they've just put out new guidelines for how that looks. And so that's really important because it means that we're using it ethically and we're understanding the importance of using it in assignments to support us, but not necessarily in a plagiaristic view. Particularly as an autistic person as well as a neurodivergent person, it's really, really important for me that these kind of our tools are accessible. They're really helpful for me in compiling information, in using information, in retaining information. My sister's dyslexic as well, and so her ability to use it to compile data, to understand data. If I have a piece of text I don't understand the context for, I can put it into something like Microsoft Copilot and it'll explain context, it'll bring sources, it'll have a bibliography, and that's really important. And so I think we're already seeing, we've had education and things like that have moved a long, long way. And so we shouldn't be scared of the potential. What we do need to be conscious of is the limits that we're going to set on it and how we enhance it into the system, rather than pretending it doesn't exist and then being frightened when it suddenly comes into the classroom, which I think is what's happened. We knew AI was coming along for a long time. We've not really thought about it in terms of the education sector. It's come and kind of slapped everyone in the face when you look at particularly in universities, and now suddenly all of the universities are scrambling for a solution. And so it's about building those solutions with young people, with academics, rather than pretending it doesn't exist and hiding from it until we need to use it to enhance our education system.
Well, I think that's a really wonderful point, and the part of engaging young people in those decision-making processes to prepare and anticipate how these things are used. Akin, I want to come to you with the next question. We've heard lots of examples of the ways that young people are interacting with AI and are using AI. Do you think that young people are always aware when they're using AI or interacting with AI?
So I think there's very obvious uses of AI. So ChatGPT, my AI on Snapchat, Google AI, Alexa, Google in general. Now that is used by a lot of people, and I think most people recognize that that is fundamentally just AI. But then if we look into algorithms that like cater to our exact shopping experiences, our exact music algorithms, Netflix, I don't think the majority of people would know that that is AI. And that can be a dangerous thing because having stuff just to your exact catering, like what you want, is a very dangerous point, and that can lead on to bad consequences. So yeah, I think there are different types of AI that are people know about.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Amy, I suppose kind of building on that from Akin, what are your biggest hopes, but also maybe some fears about an AI future?
I think as someone who's still in high school, AI is obviously something that I'm interacting with every single day. So I think my biggest hopes is that it opens up opportunities for young people like me who are really keen to move towards a sector like this. And further, that it becomes an accessible and inclusive thing that's used by everyone, even in sectors you would never imagine, like medicine and all of these things, to really help build on our day-to-day life. Further though, I think some of my biggest fears, apart from what everyone thinks of the Terminator coming back, we're all dead, being that this idea that AI could be taken into the wrong hands. It can be used in a way that is not accessible, it can be privatised, but further it can be used and fed data that isn't representative of an inclusive view, and will somehow end up seeing AI that's producing information which is racist, sexist, ableist, which in no way is what anyone in this room would want, I'm assuming. So I think for me, my biggest fear is that AI becomes something that we have to fear as a population because it's not something that's been used for good.
That's amazing. I wonder if any of the other panellists would like to share any of your hopes and fears for the future of AI. Yeah?
I think I would like to echo what's being said. As a person of color, like racism is something that like is obviously a systemic issue, and I'm not sure, like this is a very popular example, but there's the algorithm that was created to kind of track potential like offenders and people that might like end up in like jail and commit crimes, and instead of actually doing that direct task, since algorithms just kind of look at previous patterns, they just take in the data that you give it can be biased, and that's something that organizations need to be aware of. And what ended up happening in this particular example was that the algorithm was just flagging up people of color that had no interactions with police and no previous backgrounds of like committing offenses. So as someone, as like a female black person, I think it is possible that AI and algorithms just being like open source and free for the public to use is quite a dangerous tool. I know increasingly women are afraid that their photos will be deepfaked, and like the issue of data and how AI has access to other people's data. I'm not sure if people can consent to that, and do we even know if the individuals using it have informed consent, and do they know the implications of what they're doing? So I think that's something that I think that a lot of young people aren't aware of when they, for instance, when they use Zoom. Are they aware that Zoom says that by using their platform you are consenting to your images being used for their own AI algorithm? I'm not really sure that a lot of people know the full like implications and consequences. And as a student doing medicine, like consent is a very big thing, and we're also using AI to like predict and help patients, and that's something that we get taught a lot about now because it's a current evolving kind of issue. And I think that a lot of the time, because AI and algorithms and just like digital data is a fast-moving topic. It takes a long time for people to, like the rest of the information to get to the rest of the public. And like what you were saying before, it's easy for it to just, the information for it to just be accessible to a specific group of people who are knowledgeable in that sector. So yeah, I think there are a lot of, AI is something that is a tool for good, but there are a lot of, it's very important that you use it in a way that, like, you make sure that it's catered to the general public as well.
Absolutely.
And do you want to else add their hopes and fears you?
I worry about the fundamental aspects of our democracy being eroded through this. If you look at what happened with use of AI and things like Cambridge Analytica and the referendum on the European Union, you know, the panic that's kind of been created around a lot of the use of AI and a lot of algorithms. And we were talking about deepfakes as well. The use of that already, we've been seeing, you know, false images on social media around this year's general election, around other kind of elections around the world, in the US and in Europe. And that's what scares me, is the misinformation that's being created, because when we look at the truth and the trust of the media, it's fundamentally gone down, it's been eroded, and we've now got a lot of different media organisations serving a lot of different biases and purposes. And so for me, I'm concerned about the uses of AI and the uses of algorithms in order to kind of target voters, target people across the voting population, in order to manipulate them in some way, in order to kind of sway them into voting a certain way, in order to kind of understand that. I think that's my main concern, because, you know, as someone who, I study philosophy and politics at the University of Glasgow, so I learn about ethics and that side of it in the philosophy, but then in politics we're discussing the very foundations of how our society functions, and technology has both supported and has terrified many people when we look at the evolution of our society and the evolution of our culture. And so I think the way it's being used now, it's kind of just being let out and loose into the public and everyone's just testing it. But the concerns are, as we're already starting to see with these kind of elections and the kind of general politics, is how do we keep the information trustworthy, rather than things like deepfakes or kind of misinformation or targeted incorrect advertisements being put towards people, and fundamentally swaying the kind of their own opinions or voice in our democracy.
Akin or Timmy, would you like to come in with any hopes and fears for AI?
I mean, I think AI has been a massive tool in the last 5 years. As well, this is very early stages in it, but as we're seeing things such as like ChatGPT, Sarah, these videos and pictures are just another level of real, like hyper-realism. And the impact of that, like as echoed, is very, 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 very big. So I think that's my main concern, but I think to be able to safeguard that is going to be the biggest challenge in the future of AI. And it's not fully developed yet either. So as it's still getting developed into the mainstream world, that's going to be a big challenge.
Absolutely.
Just to add quickly to that, it's mostly the fear of the unknown. We don't know what direction AI is going, and it's just been let loose to the public. So it's trying to understand what AI is exactly, because even the definition of AI is not really known. So it's trying to understand what direction we're going to take with AI, and also echoing what Ewan said, that society needs to better understand it, and our democracy needs to be further developed. So,
Absolutely. I think we're going to come to questions from the audience. A reminder for people watching at home, if you have the code for the Slido, so please send in questions online. But we'll start with
I mean, you've got a great opportunity. You've got a panel of young people here that are ready and willing to take your questions. So if anyone wants to just put their hands up, yeah, we've got just a gentleman here with the glasses. I don't know if we've got a mic, so you might just have to stand up and say. You could say your name and where you're from as well. That'd be great.
Hi, Mike Barn. I'm with Historic Environment Scotland. there's a quote that I use that is from a film a while ago. That word does not mean, I do not think that word means what you think it means, which for us is AI isn't always AI. Sometimes it's workflows and automations. Do you think with the younger generation, there's that knowledge and understanding of what is actually true AI and what is just an if this then that type of program? Because we see sometimes it gets very confused.
And Amy?
I think for me it's very clear there's a lack of knowledge around AI within our generation. Frankly, we have learned AI from each other or from Google. It's not like we're going into classrooms and it's been spoken about. So I think we say AI and think of ChatGPT. We think of these things that are learning and speaking back to us. But when it comes to just automation, that's not something that I think my generation is really aware of. So I think there needs to be greater education and input, especially on behalf of educators, but the government as well, to make sure young people are aware of what they're using. But more than that, to make sure they're aware of what type of AI they're using and how that has its own outcomes and what that really looks like in the long run.
Would anybody else like to come in on that question?
I think.
Could you I got two questions too. I want to ask a question about in the aspect of youth empowerment in AI governance. You know, given the importance of engaging young people in AI governance, what strategy can be employed to ensure that youth are not only beneficiaries, but also active participants in shaping the ethical and responsible development of AI technologies? That is the first question. And the second question is, how do you really know, like, for example, now ChatGPT, you can't compare the accuracy this year compared to the last 5 years. So where are they getting this data? True, you know, because if you ask OpenAI, they won't tell you where they are getting data, but where are they getting this data truly?
I'm happy to kind of take on the first question. I think it kind of feeds into the last question as well. Engage young people. It's really as simple as that. This is a fantastic opportunity, a fantastic space, but there isn't enough of this by a country mile. It's young people are active participants in governance and democracy. The youth sector is understanding this. YoungScot, for example, have been trailblazers as an organisation for decades on this principle, but not enough at top levels of governance are young people being fed in, and I think that's really important with AI as well. Young people in the media are being patronised for using AI. Young people are being told that they shouldn't be using this, or that it's being suggested they're using it even when they're not. There's no conversations with young people in university and academia saying, how are you using it? How can we support you to use that? How can you use it ethically? There's no conversations about that. I've had no conversations at my university about that. You know, and then the conversations we're starting to have about it, this is day one. This is an open door for young people into a future of discussion with AI. And all of us young people represent, you know, millions, and it's a really important first step, yes, but this is not the end. This is just the beginning of this conversation, and we need young people engaged in every aspect in every sector, both, you know, active participants and putting them into the workforce, but also just asking them questions. I think about seldom heard groups as well. So again, as a disabled person, as an autistic person, I'm a key group because the way that I use AI is fundamentally different from someone who's neurotypical, and the way that I input prompts, or the way that I kind of prompt engineer, is so different from other people. The way that I use it is different from other people, but it's often these seldom heard groups that are the hardest to get a hold of, because you need to go into their environment, you need to speak directly to them, rather than just putting out a big advertisement asking for, you know, 40 young people to come to a session. So it's really important, you know, young carers, other kind of, you know, other really important protected characteristics. You need to go and get them. You can't just expect them to come to you with all of their ideas, because, I mean, this has been a fantastic engagement over the past kind of couple of weeks talking about our views, but this is, you know, the beginning. This is probably the first time I've ever been asked about AI and my thoughts on it, and I use it daily, and it's the same for the majority of the panel. This is the first time we're getting to actually provide insight into that, and that's not right. As you've kind of highlighted, it's not right, and we need engagement in that governance, in the safeguards that we're putting around children and young people. Ask children and young people what they're scared of, like what we had with the Children's Parliament earlier. Don't just expect that young people are going to kind of fall into your sector and fall into your conversations, because we're not. We don't have the confidence a lot of the time, or we don't have the ability to. So on that question on governance, it's including young people in the conversations and asking them, rather than just expecting them to come to you.
I think to add to that, I think we should treat AI similarly to how we treat internet safety. In every single school, you have a class dedicated or several classes throughout the years educating you on how to use the internet effectively in one aspect, like how to search up things efficiently on Google, but also you have internet safety lessons. And I just want to ask why the same isn't being done for AI. It feels like schools have just taken a laid-back approach, and they say, do not do this, do not use it to cheat, do not use it in this way, but they're not educating you as to why someone may do that. They're not educating you on what AI is. They're just saying, don't use ChatGPT or something similar. And I think school is for learning, and I just don't think it's the right approach to take. I think lack of knowledge or being oblivious has, like we have seen, it has like dire consequences and outcomes, and we have children just growing up using AI in an unsafe way, and young people are particularly vulnerable. I think schools have an important role in involving young people, and I also think, as you mentioned before, that like neurodivergent people and ethnic minorities and just people who are are part of minorities, they don't. Like, we think of AI as being this accessible tool, but a lot of the times websites and these platforms where we have AI, having Wi-Fi isn't that accessible. So we have all these accessible tools that we claim, that we say that they're so good for this and they're so good for this task, but disabled people are more likely to be in a household below the average household income, so they're less likely to have Wi-Fi, less likely to have these phone models that are equipped to use AI. A lot of websites aren't inclusive, and they aren't in regulation of being accessible. So I think it's also a kind of governmental, societal thing that we need to work on to make sure that these young people, if you have someone who is blind, and AI could be a really good tool, you need to make sure that they actually have the tools there. There are several steps between the young person and getting to that AI tool that are often missed out, and these groups are entirely unheard. So I think it's having a balance and making sure that we don't take the most superficial, easy route to make something accessible when it really isn't.
Absolutely.
We'll go here.
Armand Smith, I work on GitHub Copilot. I want to ask about future of jobs and whether you're thinking differently about your careers, given, I think, some legitimate concerns about AI replacing certain types of work, and I just was curious to hear if that worries you, and if it does, how are you thinking about it? Are you making different decisions already, or different plans for your futures?
Who would like to come in on that one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I study politics at uni, so sometimes I do wish that AI would take over the job that some politicians are doing. But unfortunately, that's probably not the case, and so instead I'm going to have to fill that void. So I just started university, so I've just kind of come into the horizon of this new age of AI. ChatGPT just kind of became a thing when I started university, and so it's been really helpful in many ways in terms of, assignments and understanding. But of course, I have the concerns. I mean, I do philosophy as well, and so a lot of that is human understanding, which AI doesn't really have sentience. It can't sometimes grasp those complex kind of ethics, morals, kind of philosophy. And politics as well. It's a very human thing. Arguing and discussing and debating is a very human thing. AIs are, like ChatGPT, are actually limited to talk about a lot of things to do with politics at the moment. So I am hopeful for the future in terms of engagement and democracy. That's something that I want to go into. And so I'm content that at the moment I think that the principles of AI wouldn't be able to venture into perhaps an understanding politics. And I think that's a benefit of AI actually, is that it can make politics alternatively, I know I kind of said earlier, more accessible. It can explain political concepts, it can explain key policies, it can do all of these things with bias, but it can explain them and make politics more accessible. It could increase the amount of young people who are able to vote because they're finally able to understand what political parties are actually standing for instead of reading a 50-page manifesto. And so it's these kind of things where I'm really optimistic about my future. I'm really enjoying the degree programme I'm on. I'm terrified because I don't know where, when I finish my degree in 2027, where on earth is AI going to be by that time? That's something that I'm really interested to see by the time I graduate and move on as a graduate into sectors. I want to go into the public sector or the third sector, and for me, I don't quite know what that'll look like. I don't know what the horizon will look like, but I'm concerned about the future of some things to do with my job being automated, maybe for the better. I'm content at the moment, for me at least, that the kind of combination of what I do is probably going to be enhanced by AI rather than swift or taken away.
Anybody else on that point? If you guys know what you want to do yet?
I myself want to go into robotics, so for me this is like, wow, the sector I want to go into is just getting more and more cool. But I have a lot of friends who look at art as their career path, and as we talked about earlier, we're seeing more and more AI where it's developing these images that humans couldn't do and definitely can't do at the same speed. So I feel like sectors like that, we're seeing more and more risk of the arts, music, fashion design, all this kind of stuff, that AI can do it so much faster than we can. So I think there's a real risk, if it's not handled correctly, that we're going to see more and more of these jobs become automated, because why pay a human to do it when you can have an AI do it in half the time for a much cheaper price? So I think we just need to look and make sure that we're talking to young people and finding out, and also advising them, this is where we are going, this is what your career could look like. Let's not tell them, don't do that, that might look a bit funny, but say, well, this is where we are, here is what the job market will look like before I've not even started university. So I think there needs to be education there on, this is what the world could look like. When you're picking careers, this needs to be something we have in mind. It's not a choice anymore to say, it doesn't really matter. We have to think about it. So it's adults' job to make sure we have the education and understanding that this is what it is going to look like, no matter the career path you're going into.
We have lots of questions coming in online now, so I'm going to ask one from the Slido. First of all, there's a comment here which I absolutely agree with, which is, what a great representation of our future, which I think is absolutely, we can all share that view. But the question I'm going to ask the panel is, do you think that the AI that young people use are designed with young people in mind? So the kind of AI systems that you're interacting with, to what extent are they designed with young people's needs or interests in mind? Rory, you mean to go?
I don't really feel like it's designed with a specific age group in general. I think it's designed on what's most likely to sell, and what's most likely to be able to be commercialized. Like, we're talking about the arts and music, and AI, as we said, AI just takes in whatever you input and puts that out. And what it's doing is kind of just taking other people's art and fashioning it into what you ask for and what the prompt that you give it. So I don't think it's specifically designed for young people. I don't think it's accessible in a way for young people to understand, like in the terms and conditions. It's not really written in a way that a 15-year-old would understand. So I think not really, and it's definitely something that we need to hold companies to account for. I don't think it's fair for you to be giving your data and having that commercialized and that being used for optimizing whatever AI or language learning model that you have. I don't really think it's fair to kind of like take advantage of young people. Like, every single social media platform has come out with their own kind of AI like bought, not because they particularly have us in mind, but just because it's the hot new thing and that's what's selling. So I think it's in general not really.
Would anybody else like to come in on that question?
I think it's safe to say most of the people in this room work in tech. How many of you have sat down and had a conversation with young people about before you've released your product? Probably not many. None of us have been spoken to, none of my friends, none of my peers. So how can anyone safely sit there and say what we're making has young people in mind when young people's opinions haven't actually been heard at all? So frankly, my answer is no, because we've not been listened to. So how can we be heard when there's not been an opinion in place before right now?
Anybody else like to come in on that one? You?
Yeah, I echo that entirely. If you think about Snapchat AI, for example, my AI, you have to pay for the Snapchat Plus subscription to unpin that from the very top of your Snapchat kind of profile. How many young people use Snapchat? They're the target audience for the app. And so it's obviously a commercial decision a lot of the time to let young people play with these products, to tell them what they think. Young people are the product, they are the testers, and yet they don't feel involved in any of the process. Again, none of us before today have really been asked about AI, and we represent a very diverse kind of skill set, and a lot of us represent very different minorities. And we are the targets for a lot of those to make sure that those are in conversations, and none of us have been in conversations about it. Not many young, and I work, across the sector. I work with a lot of young people from kind of public sector to third sector. No one in any conversation I've seen on LinkedIn, on any social media platform, has ever been asked about it or has ever talked about it as if they've been engaged. And so I completely agree. Young people are not involved, and it's, again, with the Snapchat AI, these are commercial decisions. They're being used for companies. So get young people in the door, because at the moment they're being used to play test, and young people are being used to test these products without real implications about what's the impact going to be. Social media still doesn't have the appropriate guardrails, so how on earth would AI have, after about a year of it properly being released to the world?
Absolutely. Take another question from the audience. A question from the audience.
Yeah, okay. Should we go here to the lady here, and then we'll go to the gentleman over there.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Jen Ross, and I'm from the University of Edinburgh. I was super interested in the survey response that you were sharing earlier about people choosing to use AI partly because it's not human, but it interacts. And I was wondering if the panel had thoughts about some reasons why that might be.
Well, from my own personal experience, I've been on usability sessions where they use AI to kind of talk to, be involved in apps such as that are supposed to be directed to mental health and well-being. And I think from what I've learned in these kind of sessions is that AI to the average person who's not involved in tech is just this machine that has no bias, and they're not going to impose their own personal beliefs onto you. They're not going to make you feel bad. They're not going to tell anyone because they aren't a person. And I think that's something that people like, especially if you're a young person and you're at a stage in life where everything, even if it's not that deep, everything feels like the worst thing in your life. Every single new experience that you have, it feels so horrendous, or it feels like the biggest deal in the world. And to have a tool at your disposal that you can go to it as many times, and it's not going to tell you that you're being annoying. It's not going to say that you've talked about this several times. It's just going to answer your questions and help you understand, or placate your mind, and it's just going to put your mind at ease, basically. And I think that's something that young people may like, because especially if you're in a world where mental health services aren't that accessible, or not even specific to mental health, it's a quick, accessible, usually free service, And I think that's what young people may like. It's free of kind of biases or projecting biases to you.
I just wanted to add to that young people we've just come out of the COVID-19 pandemic, and young people have been hugely affected by that. So many young people are not really thinking of the consequences of using this AI technology. When they're using the AI, it's easily accessible to them. They can just, by the tap of their fingers or by a note, by a prompt, they can just write anything and they will get an answer back. They're not really thinking where their data is going or how it's being used or manipulated. So that's why it's important to educate young people in general and make sure young people know what's happening to them. Because at the end of the day, young people are the future and their voices need to be heard.
One more question. I think the gentleman in the third row. Fourth row, sorry. Can't count.
Thank you very much, panel member. I want us to look at the aspect of deprived communities. Because we look at, many of you here are privileged, I'll say many of you are privileged to have access to or understand this AI, which is the future. We can't deny it. But what is the role of these deprived communities in terms of designing this AI policy and implementation as well? How do we engage them to make sure that we will remove those negative messages that AI is going to take away their job? How do we be inclusive enough to make sure they are part of this drive? Because if you go back to the COVID, we know how COVID affected the deprived communities, how they lost their job, how many people died. And this is AI again. Some of them are still struggling with the digital poverty, attainment gap, and so many baggages. And now AI is here. We have to embrace it. How we engage with them to ensure that we are inclusive enough and they are part of this movement and they will see the benefit for this movement. Thank you.
Deprived communities are some of the most important people because they are left behind for a lot of what happens, a lot of policies, particularly regarding technology, because it's a big topic at the moment, they are left behind. There are kind of strategies and government kind of initiatives to do that, but at the end of the day, some schools in deprived communities still can't afford smart boards. So if they can't afford smart boards, how on earth are they going to afford things like generative AI or training or technology? They're just not. And so we need to have more top level support for training and for understanding without putting the burden on teachers, because they do a lot, having this top levels of funding and support, because otherwise deprived communities are going to be left out without access to this technology, without access to learning how to use it, because things like prompt engineering, it takes time, it takes understanding of how do you get the best response out of ChatGPT, for example. What can it do, what are its limitations, what's the kind of correction error, what's the bias on it. It all takes time to learn, and my concern is not only deprived communities, the elderly as well, or those who are trying to understand the technology as it evolves. We were born, I was born in 2005, which is 2 years before the first iPhone came out. So all I ever remember is having an iPhone. I've never lived a life without an iPhone, and I now have kind of the latest one now, but I remember having the first one. And for me, that's stark. I remember that, but I've lived in an age now where I didn't have ChatGPT, I didn't have generative AI, and now it's all over the place when I'm learning at university. And so even if I'm struggling to understand and come round to some of it because a lack of education, and I get to go to university, that's a very kind of strong privilege of mine. Those who don't have that privilege, they are going to be so far behind because, many of them still don't understand how things like smart technology devices work. So how on earth are they going to understand something like that? So what we need to do is upskill. We need to go into communities and upskill them and provide them with support. And we need to have top level funding to support that and to facilitate that, because otherwise we're going to leave not only young people, but more generally these deprived communities behind. And it won't be because they can't go into a job because, AI is going to defeat it. It's because they don't know how to work with the AI because they've been given no support to use it.
I was also going to add to that by saying that oftentimes deprived communities are the ones being taken advantage of. Like using the example of iPhones, where do most people know where we get our iPhones from? No, and it's usually deprived communities that are getting paid low wages. And it's ignorance it's not your fault if you don't know, but I think if you have the tools in which you can find out that information, that is like, it is kind of your fault. And I think governments need to be holding companies and people that are making these models to account and asking them the correct questions and making sure that they actually do comply, and making sure that these deprived communities aren't getting left behind. I know we always say schools should educate, but I think it's time to have new roles. AI is new, so I don't know why we should keep leaning back on kind of specifically teachers being told to do everything when they probably don't know themselves. And I think it's kind of time for new initiatives and having new roles and new positions from top level positions like in the government down to kind of schools, so that we have the right information being taught. Because if you get a 1 hour training session and you're told to teach that to your kids, do you really know what you're teaching? I don't really think so. Having new positions allows us to involve new voices that wouldn't traditionally be heard, and I think that would be a good opportunity to involve deprived communities.
Thank you. That's amazing. One last question. We're going to in the room. One last question in the room.
Go up the back, if that's again. It's a bit of a trying to pick somebody that hasn't gone before. Sorry.
Thank you. My name's Yasmin. I'm from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. The panel touched on this a little bit, but I'd be really interested in understanding their thoughts on how young people are engaging with some of the underlying narratives around AI. So thinking about AI's environmental impacts, some of the impacts on the hidden labor costs, and also kind of colonial narratives around AI, where training data is kind of built and trained by people in the global south. So I'm wondering, how do you feel that young people are balancing AI use with some of these wider social, environmental impacts? Thank you.
Amy.
I think I'm quite passionate about the environment. I take part in a lot of volunteering surrounding it. But frankly, once again, we're not educated. We don't know. Like, how do you expect us to take that into account when we're not told? Like, I think that's where people have got to think. You're asking young people to hold themselves to account for something they don't know about. So the first step to making sure they can hold themselves and consider these environmental and ethical impacts is educate them on them, make them aware that there are environmental impacts to using AI, there are ethical impacts, but that's where it starts. It starts at the education of young people.
Who else would like to come? Maureen?
I think kind of building on what your answer there, young people don't know, and I think I really only know about like the ethical implications and the environmental implications because I have a personal interest in it, and like I've had modules in uni kind of related to that, and also like I have friends that are involved in the digital kind of aspect, and I'll learn that, oh yeah, AI, they actually have centers for this. Like, it's not just like a thing in the cloud. Cloud takes up physical space, and that has consequences for different communities. So I think as well, like, you just don't know. You wouldn't know because you kind of, the information that you do get is online, and the only thing that you're going to get is the popular kind of options. I know we could just, everyone can Google, but how can you Google if you don't know of existence? And I think it's something that it needs to be taught, and it just needs to be like a constant kind of like awareness and just be spoken about in general, so that we do have a general understanding that yes, these are the ethical implications, and if we want companies to be more ethical or be more environmentally friendly, you need to hold them to account, and you need to either like stop using their products or like encourage use of like more environmentally products, I would say.
Amazing. We have loads of questions coming in, and I feel like this conversation could easily go on all afternoon, but sadly we have run out of time. But I think it's been an amazing discussion and very clearly showed the value of bringing young people's voices into these conversations, and that the level of insight that you all have, that you bring as well, my young person's experience, I think really clearly shows the importance of whatever you're working in around AI, whether it's designing, developing new technologies, or thinking about policy, thinking about regulation. There is huge value in bringing young people into those conversations. Kirsten, if you want to say any final words.
Just to echo that, and just want to extend a huge thanks to all of our amazing volunteers. They all get involved in various projects with YoungScot, but have given their time today to come along. And not only today, but we've had lots of sessions where we've had prior discussions, and we really appreciate all your insight and experience that you shared with us today. So a big round of applause for our volunteers.